But I realized, oh my gosh, so I'm just reliving like terrible moments from the past by bringing that up as a way to like, bond with people. And so then I became, very, you could say I became allergic to doing that. It's just not something I do. It just became so clear to me, which is so interesting when something is so ingrained in your reality, and then when you start to see it for what it is, you're just like, uh, you just won't accept it anymore.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Creating Connections. Today I have here with me Chanoa Inez, and she has a really beautiful story. When we got together on our intro call and I got to learn more about her, there's just like something about her that's really calming, but also the experiences that she's gone through is lit the way for where she is today, and how she's built her business and her brand and how she's really supported the people in her business and in her life. And I love to share that story. Shanoa, I'd love for you to take just a minute and share where you're at and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. So I'm based in Los Angeles, but I work with clients, everywhere. I am a personal branding advisor, and I take a unique approach because I combine personal transformation and personal branding. And I'm also the author of Dream On: How to Create the New Life of Your Dreams After Upheaval or Loss.
Okay, so when I initially learned that you wrote the book Dream On and then just everything that encompasses it, I didn't realize what it was about until we really dove into it. And there's so much about that relationship that brought you to where you are today, not just with the other human, but I'm sure so much developed in yourself when all of that happened. And I maybe we should just go straight into that and how that has affected how you do business today. And so if you want to just open it up however you want to, how you recall things started, or if you want to start from the end, whatever feels right to you.
Yeah, I'll just start from the beginning. I was living in Miami and my boyfriend was from Montenegro and I fell in love with the country. I couldn't wait to visit. So when we went on vacation, I actually really had a hard time going home. I didn't want to talk about my trips, and people were like, "Oh, I loved your pictures, your videos." And I was just like, "I don't want to talk about it."
Oh.
So yeah, so we made a deal that we would move there the next year. So because he just changed careers, it made sense for him. And I just started copywriting and doing some freelance journalism also, but it was a side gig. So I had a year to prepare to turn that into a full-time business so that I wouldn't have to think about, working in a foreign country. So we did that. And so we got there the next summer, and the first day was just magical. We spent the day in the capital with his parents, and then we went to the seacoast for our first stop, and it was just magical. And I remember up until that point in my life, it was the first time I'd felt as if everything was perfect. I had no problems. Everything was just wow, it was a very special time. But unfortunately, when I woke up in the morning, I saw that he passed away in the night. So he passed away from a clot, which is the last thing you expect with, such young people. And someone so as energetic as he was, really, he was just, so strong and energetic. So as you can imagine, that was then like it was really the start of another life for me. I look at it like that because it was just so shocking.
Mhm.
And Yeah, so as you can imagine, I went through a dark period. I decided to stay in Europe, which half the people thought that was a good idea, and the other half thought that was silly. But I didn't see the point to go back to Miami, which I always planned to leave anyway. And just even though I was staying in his country. Ironically, it didn't remind me of him in that kind of way. It reminded of us
Mhm.
on, on vacation, but I wouldn't have, everyday chores and then, running errands and then just getting hit by, so many memories, right? So it was, really stop and go. And I say now I'm grateful in hindsight that, a couple of years later, I started having all these health challenges. And I didn't realize I had all this unresolved grief working behind the scenes. And it
Mm.
was like one food allergy after another, food sensitivities, all kinds of problematic things that were chronic and that doctors couldn't just like give you something to just like resolve it.
Yeah.
And I say I'm thankful now because then it set me off on this journey. Meditation, yoga, everything. I went to the Amazon plant medicine retreat. I tried everything under the sun because I knew it's like it had to be internal. Like, why would all these things come about? But I didn't actually connect to the grief, interestingly enough. I was connecting it to the stress in the present moment. And through all this journey, I knew that something was missing. I was like, there's just no way I'm doing all of this. And I take such good care of myself and I'm not getting better. But when I decided to move back to the States, I moved to LA. And it was about 7 years later, almost, no, 6+ years later, and just getting out of my environment, I started seeing things I couldn't see before because I was like so in my routine. And I was suddenly able to eat a lot more foods than I could eat before. And I was able to see, oh my gosh, I have a victim mindset. And I realized I
Mm.
had it from before he passed away. And that really cemented it for me because it was such a shock. And then I realized the most important component after that was just the self-love piece was missing. So a few years after I got to LA, I realized, my best friend at the time and a romantic relationship that ended, and it was like, oh my gosh, the two people closest to me, I picked people who would help me feel like a victim. So you can say like I have self-love and I love myself because it actually plays out in actions. So I had so much clarity. So everything just started to change in my life rapidly. It's like after doing, working on things for so long, but without those two big pieces, it was just like barely scratching the surface. I got home one day and it just hit me. I just realized I just got out of that cloud of grief. I didn't realize I was carrying it for that long. And everything just made sense to me. And the next thought I had was I have to write a book. And I was actually nervous to write a book, even though I'm a writer by trade. I was a copywriter. But I just realized, if I can help, however many people to not get stuck in that trap, because it doesn't have to be as dramatic as the loss of a loved one. It can be a layoff. There's so many different things,
Mhm.
so many disappointments where people, feel like they've gotten past it, but they've started dreaming smaller and shrinking back. They're shrinking their lives because they don't want to be disappointed again. And that's really what the book is about, getting people re-energized to start dreaming bigger and doing, greater things in their lives.
That is so beautiful. And it's really interesting that it took you years to realize that you had a veil over your eyes because you felt like you were living your life really fully and that you had moved on. And in the moment that you recognized that it was an internal thing and you dug deeper and did the work to remove that, that's such a huge thing to see and to be able to support other people through. The courage to write the book, to share all of that. I can't imagine how it touches people to be able to identify certain things that maybe people are still going through that they don't realize is something that's related to grief or to loss. And hopefully that helps them to identify these things and remove it from their lives so that they can live freely and enjoy life again or relive life in a really new way that they hadn't before. Oh, do you recall any specific moments or instance where you were like, this is what it was, this is where it came from, and I'm no longer the victim. Was there any specific moment or moments where that came about for you?
The victim mindset realization came in bits, so little parts. So when I started feeling disconnected with some of the conversations happening around me. For example, I once went to lunch with friends, and I had sat down. By the way, I've gotten rid of all the allergies except for one, and that one's much weaker now. So
Oh my
back
gosh,
then, I
that's
had to like
wonderful.
announce, thank you. I had to announce a litany of allergies. So It was one of those times, and I was with a friend of mine, and then her friends I just met for the first time. And their server came over and asked if anyone had allergies. And then I went, I started to answer, and she said, "Oh," and she starts sort of speaking it for me. And then she tells everyone at the table, like, "Oh, it's terrible. And if she gets an allergic reaction, this happens, that happens." And I could
Oh,
just see, the stark reality of like, what a sob story. Like, who cares? If I have allergies, it should just be very like, mechanical. These are the allergies, that's
right
it.
here.
So I
And
saw
this.
how
Yeah.
I was thinking like that, and then how people around me started acting like that and treating me like a victim. And it felt so uncomfortable. Whereas I realized, oh my gosh, like this is just like one example of things that, dynamics that have been playing out in my life. And I thought they were normal, and they weren't. Another one was that I had a tendency to talk about these sob stories from the past. And they weren't for like pity, but it was like, you meet people, and usually the typical thing is, okay, what do you do? Where do you live? People want to connect on these kind of like very basic levels. But then almost always, like, I would find myself telling some kind of terrible story from the past just because I realized like people really gravitate towards stories like that. People gravitate, it's like watching an accident. It's like watching, people are doom scrolling, right?
Yeah,
So,
you don't want to
and
take your eyes away. Like
no,
yeah, it is
they're
compelling. It
riveted.
really is.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
somebody would just like something would come up, and I would like, oh, and I just contribute my piece of story, and and it connects you with people, which is weird. So it wasn't a conscious decision at all, but I realized, oh my gosh, so I'm just reliving like terrible moments from the past by bringing that up as a way to like bond with people, and so then I became very, you could say I became allergic to doing that. It's just not something I do. It just became so clear to me, which is so interesting when something is so ingrained in your reality, and then when you start to see it for what it is, you're just like, uh, you just won't accept it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, and it ties back to like our identity, right? How are we writing our stories, the narrative that we create for ourselves? And then when we meet new people, there is a standard way of getting to know people. You have your typical go-to, right? Depending on what room you're in, you know what story you're going to tell, how you're going to tell it, how it's connected you to people before. You might make little tweaks to it, certain things you do want to share, certain things you don't, depending on how comfortable you feel with that person. But you're absolutely right that you get to choose what story you pull from the arsenal, and you've experienced a ton of things in life, and that's the same with all of us, right? We have dynamic, like a breadth of human, and we get to choose. And depending on how we narrate that story and how we share it, places us in the hero or in the victim mind frame.
Mm,
And I the way that I feel and understand it is like it's our way of loving and receiving love and feeling heard and understood is when we know that people are going to come to our rescue or come and feel empathy for us. And that's an easy thing to feel in most cases, and an easy thing to connect on is empathy. So that's the story we pull. When the light has been shed on the victim mentality, you it's like it is having to all of a sudden recreate your life. It's like, if I'm not this person who went through this thing, if I'm not this person who needs support through this, or who had to have a lot of support through this part of my life, then who am I now? Who am I claiming to be? And so you chose to claim something very different. And I can just see it in the way that you speak, the way that you share your story, and how brief you are about it as well, because it also immediately shows I'm healed from that. It is a part of me, but I'm not a victim of what happened. And I'm not asking for you to feel sorry for me, which, you know, it's not it's not something that is necessarily taught, right? We don't go
no.
through life saying this is how you're going to handle this whenever it happens. Grief happens, sadness happens. We know death is a part of life. It's the circle, but a lot of us avoid that conversation. And I would love to know more about what your life looks like now with that aspect being a part of your life, but not viewing it from the lens of being a victim. And I know it's not just losing your partner. There are other aspects previous to that in which you fell into the victim mindset. How do you communicate now in a different way where it's like, do you just not bring it up at all, or do you just share it in a different way? How does that look now?
I only bring up things if they happen to come up organically, um, and if they serve a purpose. So, um, and that purpose has to be beneficial.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, as you said, it's really interesting. Obviously, Bodo's passing is connected to how I'm helping people, right? So I do talk about it frequently. That's a little different, but it's really interesting looking back at other events in my life. You could say like, for example, take a situation where I was like wronged, right, in a major way. And it's interesting. I've done a lot of work for in forgiveness, not reconciling with people, but forgiving from afar. And, for some particularly egregious situations, you're, well, I've found it to be the case with me. I've had to go over and forgive somebody, countless times, like dozens of times, because I'll catch myself in a thought and I'm like, oh, that's not, you can't have that thought and have given forgiveness to somebody. Um, so I was starting off with that. It was a concentrated effort. And then I just kind of like let that go aside. But as I've evolved in life to say that I'm so, I'm just so joyful. I'm so grateful, which is just not something people associate with somebody who's had these experiences in their lives. Now, when I look back at the past, I actually don't even see terrible situations as having been so terrible. They feel different now and I can look at them differently. And sometimes I can see just like the lesson in it, or if there's no
Mhm.
lesson in it, I can just, kind of sever those energetic ties. I don't feel any kind of weight from them, which is really nice. I'm sometimes surprised because sometimes I'll just remember something and I realize I have no feeling about it. And when you can get to that place for any area of your life, when you can let go of that kind of emotional baggage, it's really nice because it brings so much lightness to your life, so much joy, and you're able to get energized to create more and be there more for yourself and for others.
Lovely. The way that you put it and the way that you described how you can let go of those pieces, but also you're so aware of the thoughts that come to mind, which is so important because, especially now in these days where we're constantly, like you said, doom scrolling, there's so much to distract us. We forget to connect to ourselves, to be able to listen to our thoughts, to even know that they're happening. Because a lot of times we're going about our day, doing the dishes, cleaning, just driving even, and so many thoughts will cross our head. It takes concerted effort to recognize what's benefiting us and what is just in there for a ton of noise. And if we don't isolate that and start removing the things that don't serve us, we start to lose ourselves in that, and you won't be able to get rid of the victim mentality and rewrite your story if you aren't present and recognizing what you're thinking on a very regular basis. So tell me about how you started to be able to identify the thoughts that were going through your mind and start pulling them from where they don't belong. Was that through meditation? I know that you've said you've learned so many different processes and been to a lot of retreats and events that helped you to check in internally. So do you recall a time when you started noticing what you were thinking and how you
Mhm.
connected to all of that?
Yeah, I started noticing that a long time before I actually had those major changes because I still didn't realize the victim mindset and self-love piece. But I was getting pretty vigilant about tracking my thoughts, but I didn't know why I would have certain thought patterns come up where I was like trying to change them and why they kept coming up. So I didn't see that they were like anchored to the those two big dynamics. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's so important, and it's also something I talk about in my book. Like, I like to say, you know. Sometimes because we have so many thoughts, it can be overwhelming if you're trying to check each thought and make it positive, right? Sometimes that's just like a whack-a-mole.
Yeah, yeah.
So it really depends what's going on. Like there's two different ways you can do it, approach it. It's like one is that if it feels overwhelming to check each thought, when you have these thoughts that are not the kinds of thoughts you'd like to be thinking, you can kind of look at it like a ticker tape going by, and like you don't necessarily sign off on everything on that ticker tape, you know. There are the thoughts you're having intentionally, and then there's just kind of like the flotsam and jetsam going by. Or the other way is like if you do want to take the time or can take the time to check each thought, I really promote this idea that it's really important to, make sure every thought that passes through your mind about yourself is something that you could say to a friend. If it's not something you could say to a friend, then you shouldn't be saying it to yourself, thinking it towards yourself, because most people, I think that's really where we get tripped up the most. Like, forget about everything else happening in our worlds. We're not being kind to ourselves. We're not giving ourselves grace. And so we've lost that first battle, and then everything else just becomes impossible.
That that applies to a lot of things, right? Um, if you're going to notice or tackle everything all at once, you're not going to want to tackle it at all. It's so overwhelming. So I love how you said, the ticker tape and just the things that you notice that you can remove or that you can take out, you do, but otherwise let it float by. I think that's really important to be able to see that all of what we've discussed brings us back to today and where we are in this world and how we share ourselves and how that builds our purpose and our brand and how we connect with others, how other people find us, how they view us, how they understand us. So you share magnetic or creating magnetism in your branding. So
Mhm.
we talked about a few things previously, but I would love to know more about what that looks like today and how we can utilize that to anyone listening who wants to be able to use their story to create a magnetizing brand. Um, and it doesn't necessarily obviously have to be just a story of theirs, but just them and themselves. How should we be sharing ourselves today to be able to make an impact
Mhm.
with what we're putting out there?
Yeah. Ooh, it's so interesting because a lot of people, they hear the phrase personal brand and they're like, oh no. They're thinking they have to perform. They need their professional persona. And
Hmm.
I've seen so much of that. And really what I'm helping clients do, it's the opposite of that. It's like there's so much power in showing up as the person who you are. And when people get a chance to, know you, your true passions, your purpose, your values, and, they're going to be so much more open to hearing about what you're doing in business. They're excited about that too. They're going to be, singing your praises. They're going to be jumping aboard to partner with you, to work with you. And even if someone's just completely not in your target audience, like they're still gonna be like so ready to find any opportunity to support you because, um, as that popular saying goes, people do pe business with people. It's not business, even business to business. It's still people, right? And so it's really important, and it's actually really empowering because I know, personal brands, yes, they're important online and off, but especially online, there's so much noise. And so it's really important to show up so you don't become forgotten. But at the same time, so many business owners, they feel really burnt out or exhausted when they show up for their personal brands, but that's because they're performing. They think they have to show up in a certain way for people to want to hear them or for it to be considered, professional. Um, and so it's a really freeing experience where it's like one, letting go of any of that, any of those characters, any of those masks. But two, it's like it's very similar to my book and actually incorporates some of those principles. But it's really, really improving your relationship with yourself. then improving, how you interact with others in the world. So then you're able to deepen the connections with others because you're showing up as your true self. And then you get into all the classic, fun stuff, messaging, positioning, communication.
Then it gets into like the nitty-gritty and all of that. But before you get into all of that, you need to just start. And if you feel like you're having to create something that's not true to yourself or have to follow a specific formula, this is how you go viral, this is how you follow all the trends, again, all these stumbling blocks, and you're like, nope, that's too many things. I'm not going to do that. So I think what you're saying is just, what are you doing today? What are you thinking? How are you feeling? That's what goes out. There's no need to put all these layers of filters and all these changes before it goes out. It's just what is already on your heart. Who you already are is exactly what people want to see. And there's so much to that as well because people are putting their information and creating content through AI that you end up seeing so much of the same thing. And people refer to it as AI slop. At the end of the day, it's exactly like you said. We want to be able to connect with the human on the other side of the business or the human behind the message or the post or the video. And it is really true, whether it is B2B or B2C, there's a human behind it running it. So how are we connecting to it? How are you creating a connection with the person that you're sharing your story about or just a thought or idea or anything that you have and I think it's just the realness of it all, right? Like the less filters applied, the easier it is to connect through the screen, through the wall, through all of the things in between us. Um, with that being said, being human and connecting and being able to really feel one another. You have a retreat coming up. Can you tell me more about what that entails? I imagine it's going to include a lot of the goodness that you've already explored and discovered in your life and through this process that you've been through. So tell me more about what
Yeah.
that's going to be like.
Yeah, it's called Then Comes Awe, which is the same name as my author newsletter, and it's inspired by the Seek Awe chapter in my book Dream On. So that will be in Montenegro, which is where my book begins, and it will always be my second home. So I will take attendees to the Bay of Kotor, which is a gorgeous kind of magical place. It's the Adriatic Sea on a fjord-like bay and it's about an hour and a half into Dubrovnik. So we're gonna go. It's all gonna be about connecting to new experiences, and we'll have daily meditations and reflection. We'll have yoga in a very scenic, uh, venue led by an international instructor. We'll have a master sommelier. We'll have wine tastings and dining experiences. We'll have sailing. So it's gonna be a really, you know, a joyful experience. It's going to be about, okay, not just having, connecting to joy and having these wonderful new experiences on the retreat, but also like integrating how can I continue feeling like this when I go home and how can I continue to tune into and seek awe. Because awe is something I feel so strongly about. It's a feeling that connects us to what it is to be human, and it lets us let go of so many of the worries and uh, the kinds of routine situations we can get into life, and to remember that there's just so much. There's so many wonderful things happening all the time, and we can point our attention towards those things. So I'm really looking forward to leading that intimate group. It's going to be capped at 12 people.
Oh my gosh, it sounds is as you're describing it, I'm like imagining myself going through those experiences and even the way that you say the locations and everything. I'm just like, oh, I really feel like I'm there and it's a super special experience. It seems like it's super curated to be really transformational. And you hear about a lot of retreats and meditational retreats and things like that. How I was actually going to ask, how is yours different? But you really walked us through all of it to make that experience different. And if anyone listening or watching is like me, I really just sat there and tuned into all your descriptions and the way that you talked about it. And that in itself is just so inviting. to be able to join you in that process. So for anyone who's interested, who wants to explore just the depths of their inner selves, to be able to live that awesome experience with Chanoa, I invite you to, I'm going to have the link below so that you can access all of that so you know how to connect with Chanoa and learn more about her work. I really feel like to close this out, what you said earlier that I didn't, I forgot to touch on. Um, the way that you think back about the things that have happened to you, you don't see them in the same way. And it makes me think of how the saying of everything happens for me instead of to me. And I think you really beautifully lived that and described that in our conversation today. And it's something that I've been reflecting a lot on recently too, when I think about the things that I've been through that may have caused pain or hurt or have made me feel like a bad person or not enough or undeserving, like those were the things that needed to happen in order to create who I am today and then who I'm going to become. And that in itself is so beautiful. It couldn't have happened any other way. So to be able to look back and appreciate it in a new light is the word you've said a lot is so freeing. So I am so grateful that you were able to join us today in a free way, in the way that you are, and to have this conversation. It was so delightful for me. And I look forward to learning more about what you are doing, how you're serving, and how you're showing up in the way that you're doing it. Because I feel like you're living the life of a lot of people. People want to be able to be free, not just physically, right? Like being able to travel and do all of those things, but mentally too. No matter where you are, whether you're able to travel or not, if you can be free, starting with your mind and be internally starting with you, then so much more is possible. And then to free yourself from that victim mindset and the stories that were created before you even were aware that they were stories, um, is a huge thing. So I would love for you to share, whatever is on your heart as we close out this conversation and what you want for the audience to leave with.
Hmm. I just want to say, when you see me here smiling and, giggling, see that. And then if you, even, to read my book or read the sample and you'll see what I went through. And I just want you to look at that as an example. No matter what you're dealing with right now, you can come out from the other side of it and life can be good again. And you might even be, happier than ever. You're just so much more resilient than you know. And I would just say, try not to fall under the illusion of like what's happening right now. And that's not the full story. It doesn't have to be that.
I love it. Thank you so much, Noah. If you found any kind of value in listening or watching today, please connect with Chanoa. Let us know what you really enjoyed. Share it with other people who you know can benefit from this conversation. Find us on social media, leave a comment here. We would love to know how this has affected you. And we would love to bring more of it. If you are able to, if you found any kind of resonance in what Chanoa shared about her retreat, it would be so awesome if you signed up, enjoyed that experience, and then come back and let us know. I'd love to see photos, videos like of the experience and how you guys connected. So thank you so much again for being here, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.